Okay, so today we're diving into something kind of different, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's like a treasure hunt, but not for gold or anything like that. We're talking spiritual riches, divine inheritance, all that good stuff.
Okay.
Our source is really digging deep into this idea of the riches of God's glory. Like, that phrase is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it really got me thinking, what does that even look like in our everyday lives? Like, what kind of wealth are we talking about here?
Yeah, it's a good question.
So I'm ready to find out.
Me too.
What?
Well, what's interesting here is that the source isn't talking about, like material wealth.
Okay.
They're using these biblical references like Philippians 4.19,
right,
where Paul talks about God supplying every need, but he says, according to his riches in glory.
So not your typical trust fund then.
Exactly. It's way bigger than that.
Okay.
It's more like, think of it like an inheritance, right? But it's an inheritance that includes like spiritual blessings, inner strength, the power to overcome challenges. It's about experiencing the fullness of God's blessings, really, like it describes in Ephesians 1.16:21,
Yeah.
in every area of life.
Okay, that's starting to make a little more sense. But then the source mentions something about exercising our covenant rights with God to access these riches.
Right.
Now, what does that even mean, practically speaking?
Yeah, it's not like knowing like a secret handshake or some code.
Yeah.
The source actually points to Matthew 6.33, where, Jesus tells his followers to seek first God's kingdom and righteousness, and all these things will be added to them. So it's like aligning our priorities, right?
Yeah.
Our actions with God's will and trusting he'll provide.
So it's about living in a way that reflects that trust, that belief
Yeah, absolutely.
in his goodness.
Exactly. The source really emphasizes that God wants to bless us. Like Psalm 84.11 says that he does not refuse any good thing to those who do what is right.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here, right? We're talking about aligning ourselves with God's will.
Trusting him.
Trusting in his goodness.
Yes.
Okay, but then they throw in this curveball.
Okay.
They link divine mystery with the wealth of God's glory. They even reference Colossians 1.27 specifically.
That's a good one.
Now, that's an interesting combination.
It is interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, it's about digging deeper, going beyond, like, the surface level of faith. Right.
Okay.
So the source seems to be saying that when we actively, explore the mysteries of faith, seek a deeper understanding of God,
right,
a closer relationship with him, that's when we begin to unlock the, boundless riches of his glory. It's a journey, a continuous spiritual growth.
It's less about checking boxes and more about cultivating a deeper connection.
Yes.
Like any good relationship, really.
I think that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the source also talks about finding strength and renewal through these divine riches, right? Particularly when we're feeling depleted, which, let's be real, is probably most of the time these days.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
The world is a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And they specifically highlight Ephesians 3.16.
Yeah, okay.
Where Paul talks about being strengthened with power through his spirit. And they connect that to the idea of, waiting on the Lord, from Isaiah 40.31, finding that renewal in our connection with God.
It's about tapping into that source of strength that comes from our faith.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Sure. Especially when times are tough.
When we need it most.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It reminds me of...
we're not meant to, go through life challenges alone or anything.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
That's actually a very comforting thought.
It is, yeah.
We have access to this, endless well of strength when we need it most.
Yeah. Exactly.
You just got to figure out how to tap into it, right?
And I think that, tapping into that well, it involves, making time. Making time for prayer, for reflection, nurturing our faith.
Right.
That's how we tap into it,
It's so fascinating how the source, weaves all these, different biblical passages together to, paint this picture of this incredible inheritance we have access to.
It is. It's like they're giving us a hidden map, right?
Yeah.
And each verse is like a clue that brings us closer to the treasure.
I like that.
Yeah.
And the best part is that this map, it's timeless.
Totally.
Right? It's just as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago.
Absolutely. It's amazing.
Yeah. Speaking of timeless, I was really intrigued by how the source brought in the story of the Syrophoenician woman, the one who wouldn't take no for an answer.
Yeah.
when she came to Jesus seeking healing for her daughter.
Powerful story.
What's the significance there? Like in the context of, divine glory. What's that about?
Well, I think her story is just such a powerful example of like audacious faith,
Okay.
Like here she was, a woman considered an outsider in that society, but she humbles herself.
Right.
Persistently seeks Jesus' help.
It's like she recognized something, right?
And I think, in her unwavering faith, she recognized, like the source says, the fringes of his glory. Okay. And received a miracle.
So it's about recognizing that God's grace isn't limited by, like where we come from or our circumstances, It's available even when we feel like we're like on the outside looking in,
100%. Her story reminds us that God's love, his compassion, have no boundaries.
There's no prerequisites.
Exactly. To receive his grace.
And her persistence, it teaches us about never giving up.
Yeah.
Even when we're faced with these like seemingly impossible situations.
It makes me think that sometimes the greatest blessings come when we least expect them.
When we're willing to step outside of what we think we know.
Totally.
Step outside of our comfort zone and just keep seeking,
You're getting at something really important here. It's about keeping our hearts and our minds open to the unexpected ways that,
that God might be working, right?
That God's glory might be revealed. Yeah. Because, we might have it all planned out.
Yeah.
But sometimes those greatest treasures, they're off the beaten path,
I love that analogy. That's such a good way to put it. Yeah.
It's true.
The source also delves into some other biblical examples, like the woman who was healed just by touching Jesus's garment.
Right.
And then there's the feeding of the 5,000, right?
Of course.
With just a few loaves and fishes.
Amazing.
What's the common thread running through these stories?
It's a great question.
How do they tie back to this, this divine riches idea?
Well, I think, each of those stories really highlights the boundless nature, right, of God's power, his grace.
I see ordinary people.
Right. Yeah.
Experiencing something extraordinary.
Yes, exactly.
Just by having faith.
Right. It's about, they encounter the extraordinary.
Yeah.
And it's transformative.
It's those stories are almost meant to they're igniting our own faith,
They are.
They're reminding us that with God, anything is possible.
Yeah.
Right?
They challenge us to expand our understanding of what's even possible.
Totally.
And approach our lives with this, renewed sense of hope.
Yeah.
And expectation, If God can do that for them, imagine what he can do for us.
Right, exactly.
When we dare to believe.
That's such a powerful question. It's easy to forget that sometimes.
It is.
We get so caught up in our own little worlds. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Now, the source also talks about the 7 pillars of divine wealth, which I thought was a really interesting concept.
Yeah.
What are those pillars? What are we talking about here?
That's a good question. I think it's interesting that you point that out because the source, they don't necessarily explicitly list out 7 pillars.
Okay.
But they kind of weave them throughout all the stories and the teachings. It's almost like we're supposed to uncover them as we go.
Sure.
Like clues in a treasure hunt.
Okay, I'm game. So, based on what you've gathered, what would you say some of those pillars are?
Okay.
And how do they connect to this whole divine wealth thing?
So, one that really stands out to me is faith. Right. Okay. We see again and again how crucial it is, unwavering faith to access the riches of his glory, It's like the key that unlocks the door.
Yeah, it opens up those possibilities.
Exactly. And then another one that comes to mind is obedience.
Okay, so aligning our actions with what we believe.
With God's will. It's so important, because it's in that surrender that we find the greatest blessings.
It's like tuning our lives to the right frequency to receive those transmissions, those divine transmissions,
100%. That's a great way to put it, yeah.
And what about humility?
Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Because, throughout the text, we see all these different people humbling themselves, acknowledging their need, right? Their need for God's grace.
It's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers, right?
We don't.
And that real strength comes from surrendering to something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think through that surrender, that's where we cultivate trust.
Okay.
Which is another important pillar.
Okay, so that's another one, trust.
Yeah. You see this in, the Syrophoenician woman.
Right.
Her persistence. The disciples, when they were willing to distribute the loaves and the fish.
Even when it seemed impossible. Right.
Even when it seemed impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's about, trusting that God will provide even when we can't see the whole picture.
That kind of trust, that doesn't happen overnight, does it?
It doesn't.
The process, right?
It's a process.
Yeah.
And that's where, prayer comes in.
Okay.
Another pillar.
Okay, so we got faith, obedience, humility, trust, prayer.
Yes.
Okay, so maintaining that connection. Yeah.
Exactly. It's about, fostering that conversation with the divine.
Right.
Seeking wisdom.
Right.
Seeking guidance.
Like any relationship. Right.
Exactly.
It deepens and grows stronger through, constant communication.
100%, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's beautiful.
What else?
Well, the last one I have is generosity.
Okay. How does that fit in?
It's not just about receiving blessings, right?
Okay.
But it's about being a conduit.
Letting those blessings flow through us.
Yes.
To others.
So it's about recognizing that, whether we're talking about material wealth,
yes, yeah,
spiritual wealth,
yes,
emotional wealth,
yes,
it's meant to be shared.
Absolutely. It all comes back to that.
Sharing our abundance, even in small ways, right?
Even a testament,
yeah,
to what we believe.
Wow, this deep dive has been amazing.
Yes.
We've uncovered so much about the riches of divine glory, the importance of faith, obedience, humility, trust, prayer, generosity. Wow.
So good.
It's a lot, but in the best way possible.
The best way, yeah.
What stands out to you as the most significant takeaway so far?
I think for me, it's just the reminder that we're not alone, right? That our pursuit of these riches, just like the people in the stories we've been talking about, we have access to the same strength, guidance, abundance.
Yeah.
It's not about earning it, but it's about aligning ourselves
with God's will.
Yeah.
And opening our hearts to receive it,
Oh, I love that. That's beautifully said. And we've covered a lot of ground here today. A lot.
Yeah.
What can we leave our listeners with?
Oh, that's a good one.
To ponder.
I would say, what aspect of this divine inheritance that we've been talking about, what resonates with you?
Yeah, what speaks to you? Yeah.
Yes, what speaks to you the most? And how can you actively seek it? How can that bring renewal and strength to your own life?
It's one thing to intellectually understand these concepts, but it's another to actually embody them, right? To allow them to transform us from the inside out.
Yes, exactly.
That's that active part, right? That really makes the difference.
Yeah, being intentional about it.
Yeah, choosing to see things differently.
100%. It's like looking at life through a new lens.
One that's infused with hope and faith.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And a belief in something bigger than ourselves.
100%. And I think, as we're talking about all of this, I can't help but think about all the noise, all the distraction.
Constant, right.
Oh my gosh, it's so easy to get caught up, in
the busyness of it all, for sure.
And lose sight of what really matters.
Exactly. And that's why cultivating these pillars that we've been talking about, making time for them.
It's essential. It's creating that space,
for stillness.
For connection.
In the midst of all the chaos.
Yes, exactly.
We wouldn't expect to thrive physically if we never ate, right?
Right.
So why do we expect to thrive spiritually if we don't nurture that part of ourselves?
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's we got to bring that same intentionality to every area of our lives.
Totally. And, it looks different for everyone. Right. It's about finding what works for you.
Yeah, what resonates.
What helps you connect to that source of strength.
Okay, so what would you say to someone who's listening to this? Yeah. And they're okay, this is great, but I'm feeling a little lost. Mm-hmm. Where do I even begin?
Start small. Pick one thing.
Okay.
One of those pillars we talked about.
One that's speakable to them, right?
That resonates with you.
Yeah.
And commit to it.
Okay.
Even if it's just for a few minutes a day.
Prayer.
Yeah, prayer, reflection.
Maybe an act of generosity.
Yes. It's about taking that first step.
Okay.
And trusting
the process.
Trust in the process, exactly.
And I think what's really helped me, as we've been talking about all of this, is just remembering those stories.
Yeah.
The Syrophoenician woman, right? Mm-hmm. The disciples.
Amazing stories.
Those examples of people who, dared to believe.
Who dared to believe in something bigger than themselves.
And in doing so, like, they tapped into something really powerful.
100%. It's about aligning ourselves with that inheritance, you know?
Yeah.
It's not a one-time thing.
Right.
It's a journey.
Relationship.
It's a relationship that has the power to transform every single area of our lives.
I love that.
It's beautiful.
This has been an amazing conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for diving deep with us today.
Absolutely.
Sharing your wisdom.
It's been my pleasure.
This has been so enriching.
Thank you for having me.
And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the riches of divine glory. Remember, it's a journey, not a destination. May this conversation inspire you to seek, explore, and discover the boundless treasures that await you on your own unique spiritual path. Until next time, keep diving deep.